Boker Tov and good morning. I'm Rabbi Steve Moskowitz, and this is Monday Musings, a 15-minute spiritual kickstart to the week. I am joined this morning by my newfound friend, Dr. Robert Petrone. So welcome, Rob. Great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here, Steve. It's great to see you.
I know it is. It's really great to see
Yeah.
you to have caught up.
Yeah.
So let me just say a formal introduction for Rob.
Sure.
And then we'll dive right into it. Dr. Robert Petrone is Associate Professor of Literacy Education and Youth Studies at University of Missouri at Columbia, Mizzou, as those of us from Missouri know it as. He teaches there at the School of Education. He recently published a book on education, and he's working on another on skateboarding culture. And his work focuses on understanding literacy lives of youth, particularly those in marginalized communities. And you've been developing, I know, a community literacy center with youth in a village in Uganda, I believe, among some of your projects. And also, you're working on a memoir called Used Cars about sort of your personal life growing up on Long Island and your family. I want to come back to that. We want to be sure we talk about the memoir that you're working on. So many people have been wondering how we became friends. So actually, even though you grew up pretty much near my house here in Huntington, and you're teaching in Missouri, we didn't meet on Long Island. We didn't meet in Missouri. We met hiking in Laos. In
Laos, yeah.
Going Lao. Thank you very much. So hiking to a Hmong village there. And so I want to thank my son Ari, who kind of pushed me to do that hike, because I was like, I was so worried about malaria and everything, which seems quite quaint after the past year of worrying about COVID. There were no mosquitoes when we were doing that hike. So it was great becoming friends with you and Melissa on that hike. And so welcome, Rob. Great to have you on the show. And tell us a little bit about, what's literacy education? Just catch me up there.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to say, Steve, first of all, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. And I just want to share with you about meeting you and Ari in Laos and like my experience of that, because here I was in Southeast Asia. It was the first time I traveled to that part of the world. Melissa and I were having a great vacation. I think we've been out and about for about a week and a half, maybe 10 or so days. And, excited to do a trek. I had lived in Montana, which is where Melissa's from. And I love the mountains. I love getting out and stuff like that. And we got in that pickup truck. I don't know if you remember this, but we were like in the back of like a pickup truck. And there were like eight of us. No seatbelts, people like running around. And I think they came with like some bagged lunch, like some bananas or something, for us to have on the trek. I didn't know where we were going. I literally didn't know. I think we signed up like that morning, we kind of just like left our stuff with them and, got in the back of this truck. And I could hear the accents, you grew up in Missouri, but you sound to me like you're from Long Island, and Ari sounds like he's from Long Island. And
Ari definitely sounds like he's from Long Island.
Yeah, exactly. Was he born in Long Island, by the way?
Yeah.
So I grew up on Long Island. I was born in Brooklyn. My family moved to Kings Park, just down the road from Huntington, right off 25A in Kings Park. And so here I am in Laos and hearing everyone talk. And there's, those two guys from Germany and, what have you. And I hear you and Ari talk, and I'm saying to myself, I'm like, are they from like Queens? I'm trying to like put like where you are, like within the New York City area, and I'm like, and then finally, like, came out that you guys are from Long Island. And I was like, no way. And I swear, there's something about when I'm not on Long Island and I'm around people from the island that it feels like home. And I felt it in the back of that truck. I just felt like, oh, this is going to be fun. Like, it's like, there's a sort of instant connection, an instant feeling of like, oh, I like these guys.
So we like you too, but you also have been to just as many bar and bat mitzvah parties as I have been.
Yeah, exactly. I still have a stack. I have a stack of bar mitzvah, of yarmulkes from all the bar mitzvah. And I have all the people I went to high school. My high school, you were either Italian, Jewish, or Irish. That was it. And so I grew up, I think by the time I was 14, Baruch atah Adonai, it's like I knew it, yeah. So
I guess maybe that's your literacy kind of education ear, that you hear these things, you hear these languages. So
exactly.
Although Ari probably and I were not the quietest one in pickup
No,
truck.
you were the loudest. You were the loudest, yeah, by far. Yeah, it was great. I'm really grateful I've met you too. So yeah,
We
so
are as
literacy
well.
education. So yeah, so I work mostly with future English teachers, so that I teach them how to teach reading and writing and things like that. And I study literacy in teenagers' lives, right? So I'm like out and about looking at what books are they reading or magazines are they reading, but mostly these days it's digital literacy. So they're on their phone just like we are. They're texting, they're looking at videos. And so literacy has changed a lot in the last 15, 20 years because technology has changed so much. And so technology has always been a story of literacy, like the printing press, right? Like that change, like revolutionized literacy. And so now with digital technologies advancing the way that they are, it's literacy is everywhere. It's in everyone's lives. And I would argue that kids today are reading and writing more than they ever have before, even though if you asked most people, they would probably say kids are reading and writing less, right? But if you think about like the kinds of reading and writing people are doing, it's totally different today. Not entirely, but in many ways it's entirely different. So that's
So are you making the case that so we would make some people would make the judgment they're not reading and writing because they're not reading books, but you're saying that they're reading text messages, they're reading Instagram posts,
exactly.
and they're writing those and they're creating more
That's right.
almost.
That's right. I mean, it's the
Oh,
nature
that's
of
interesting.
the nature of literacy itself has changed. It has changed. Almost every generation of people looks back and says, the kids today aren't as literate as I was. I mean, if you
Right,
just look historically, like that's always the trope. It's like
right,
these kids today, their language use, their literacy use. And
right. But
so
they say that just about everything, I think, not just about literacy.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, the argument is that the nature of literacy itself is changing, and so there's a big push, like in schools, you see it, like there's traditional literacies, the reading and writing that you're talking about. And then there's these sort of new literacies or digital literacies that students are engaged in life.
Should we be teaching differently?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
So
because
can you give me some concrete examples? I mean, I'm obviously a teacher, so
yeah. I mean, because what's happening is that there's becoming an ever widening disconnect between what we're asking kids to do in school and what they're doing in their day-to-day lives and what they're probably going to need to be doing for their futures. So a lot of times schools function almost as like a conservative, like, oh my gosh, they're not doing this and that and the other thing. And they're losing sight of what kids are doing and where we're heading as a society, and as a language and literacy sort of field. So yeah, I mean, I think that your English curriculum or teaching could involve like bringing in some of these texts that you were just talking about as a way to engage kids and have them talk more explicitly about the kinds of literacies that they're engaged in
you're
outside of
talking
work.
about, as opposed to reading a short story, I could be unpacking an Instagram post with my
Absolutely.
my students.
Yeah. And you could do both, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
have
I'm
to
not
be
saying
either
one or
or,
the
but it could
other.
be exactly. And you could ask students to respond to texts using some of those forms. So if you're interested in literary analysis or character analysis, for example, in my case, you could ask them, what would Romeo and Juliet, let's say, if you were teaching that, how would they be texting each other, right? So take the scene when they're on the balcony and put that into a text, right? And what that would give you is like their analysis of what those characters are saying to each other, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just thinking, my mom is an English teacher, of course, and I think this might drive her crazy, but
Yeah.
this conversation. But I really appreciate what you're saying, because education tends to be about preserving, and conserving, sort of like what the past and
That's right.
the tradition. I mean, especially obviously in the synagogue. So I mean,
Yeah,
that's what it's
exactly.
all about. That's what it's all about. I actually have been more and more comfortable. We used to say, don't put your cell phones away, turn them off. And I'm like, turn them on. We're going to actually look at this on a website and read it. And I'm going to,
Hmm.
pick I just did this with the kids, like pick your favorite pictures from this. I had them go to a specific website. And
Yeah,
then we talked about it. I mean, why not use them as tools? I'm not saying I
exactly.
did a great job with it, but I'm just saying that's part of the effort.
Yeah. Let me just say this one thing. So if you think about like reading a website versus reading a book, like when you read a book, you read from left to right and top to bottom. Think about when you get on a website, you could actually read into the text.
Right.
So it's a totally, it's like a literally a different way of reading, like a different way your brain is operating, a different way your eyes are moving, stuff like that.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's remarkable. And how are you bringing that to sort of these marginalized communities? I mean, like how's that piece?
So I'll take skateboarding for example. So I
Yeah.
did like a 3-year study of skateboarding culture. I hung out at a skate park. I'm working on a book right now. It's called Failing to Learn, right? So it's a group of kids who are failing to learn at school, right? So they're getting kicked out, pushed out, they're dropping out. And I knew this group of guys and I knew that they hung out at the skate park. So I went into that skate park as an educational researcher asking the question, what are these kids doing well? What are they like? Why are they hanging out here? How is this space working for them? So they're taking their phones out and they're watching each other, videoing it, and then they're pulling each other like, let's watch this and learn from it. Right? They're posting on social media. They're doing all of these different things. They're reading magazines online and watching videos as a way to help them in their performance of skateboarding. So that's just like one example.
So
Right?
so they're learning. It's just this traditional box is not working for them.
Exactly.
And
That's
is that the piece, the marginalized communities? Is that what's marginalizes them? I mean,
so marginalized typically I look at via like race, class, these kinds of ways in which people are marginalized in greater society. And so then I'll look and see. So for example, I have a current research project with a Native American community in Montana, right? So if you think of like communities that are marginalized writ large within our culture, that's mostly what I mean by marginalized. So this group of skateboarders, they're sort of at the lower rung of socioeconomics, right? And so like what they're looking for out of a school is different than what schools are designed to give them. So they sort of feel inherently marginalized by schools, like the kinds of jobs that they want, the kinds of vision they have for their life is not what school is preparing them for.
I mean, this is a very general question, but how can how does a school adapt to this? Or because I mean, this it seems to me that the fundamental issue is that we're asking the student to adapt to the school as opposed to the educational system kind of figure out what's best for their students.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like what the question you're asking is like, that's like the key question that we're all trying to get at through the research.
Right.
So for my research with skateboarding is to understand how learning is happening in that space for these guys so that maybe some of those underlying principles could be brought into a school. So I'll give you one concrete example. At a skate park, when you go there, there's 5-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 25-year-olds hanging out all in the same space, right? And the 15-year-old gets to mentor the 7-year-old. He gets to teach him how to skateboard, and he gets mentored by the 25-year-old at the same time, right? So by the fact that he gets to mentor a kid, he feels good about himself. He has something of value to contribute, right? At the school, you go into a school, we segregate kids before any other way. We segregate them by age, right? You're 14, you're with 14-year-olds. You're not allowed to talk to the 12-year-olds,
And by ability.
And by ability, exactly. And so what would it look like if kids had opportunities to mentor other kids, let's say, who were younger than them? And one study that I just love, you have 9th graders who are at-risk readers, struggling readers. The teacher, instead of, reifying these ideas that they're not good readers, she taught them how to be reading tutors to 3rd graders. And so the whole class that they had to take on struggling reading was designed to help 3rd graders learn to read. And their reading scores and the 3rd graders' reading scores went through the roof, right? So they were sort of repositioned as authority and experts rather than told that they're deficit, they're told that they don't have skills, right? So that was an idea that like I see happening at the skate park organically, but those kids going to school, they've got nothing to contribute, basically.
I feel a sermon emerging about standardized testing, but
let's not go there. Yeah.
I feel I really want to give, so because I just feel it's just sort of like it's just pounding students into this box and evaluating them by these numbers. Everything has to be concretized, in terms of some sort of objective number, and that's where you're on the value scale, which is deeply problematic.
Yeah.
So
Agreed, especially for something like English. I mean, when you're talking about literary text or writing, expressing thoughts, whatever it is. So how do you quantify that into a standardized number?
Look, and just a quick note. I mean, some of the great creative geniuses in throughout history, were had all sorts of difficulties in school. In like sort of the
That's right.
traditional setting, right?
Yeah,
Yet
exactly.
we read them in school.
That's right. That's
So
right.
so this is, you just got to think about that. So I really want to talk about the memoir you're working on as
Yeah.
well, because it's very personal. So tell us where this came from.
Yeah. So I grew up on Long Island, and my father, Thomas Petrone, who's since passed away, he had MS. And he got it when I was just born. I think I was maybe one when he got diagnosed. And he had this is the mid 70s, and he had a really bad case of it. And they just didn't have the treatments out at the time. And so he never worked another day in his life. He was 33 years old. He got diagnosed. And I was the fourth kid. We had another kid come a couple years later. And so my mother wasn't working at the time. She was raising kids. My father got sick. And so there was this house of 5 kids, a sick father, and my mom went back to work, and we struggled. We just struggled economically. We struggled in lots of ways. And my father was I try to feel into that. 33 years old with a whole brood, and then I come home from the doctor, and it's like I'm never going to work again. Like, what, psychologically, emotionally, what would that be like? It'd be challenging. I think it'd be really hard, especially coming, a Brooklyn Italian guy from the 50s, like, that you don't talk about stuff. And so anyway, so that was the milieu. That was like what I grew up in. And, even just being in a family of 5 kids, there's just stuff that happens. When you have kids, it's funny stuff, there's sad stuff. And so when I don't know, when I was 30, 34, 35, I was like, I need to write about this. I felt like there was unresolved stuff, trauma, what it hurts, just unresolved sort of stuff that had happened in my life. And so I had this.
I wonder,
Yeah, yeah.
Rob, just why was writing the answer to working through the trauma and those?
For me, I mean, I'm an English teacher, and so I fell in love with books, and I fell in love with story, and music too. In fact, the title of the book, Used Cars, comes from a song by Bruce Springsteen, right? It's a story of him growing up, kind of not having a lot of money and having to go to the used car lot with his parents. And so I've always found meaning through story, through narrative. And so for me, and I think I became an English teacher because I always wanted to be a writer. I mean, most English teachers, I think, or a lot of them do. And so it just hit me. I was like, I want to write about this. And so I sat down and I started writing it out, and I started like processing through the stuff, and I was like, wow, there's something here for me. So I just kept writing it, and kept like processing through it. And I'd cry, I'd laugh, all the things. Yeah. And eventually my siblings found out about it. And they were like, wait, what? You're writing a book about our family? And they became very curious.
And what was have they read it?
Yeah. Eventually I sent them sections or the whole book. Yeah. And it was tough, because it's, I didn't write it thinking that I'd ever try to get it published. I wrote it just for me. I mean, that's like the therapeutic effect of writing,
Right. I think that's a really important lesson. I mean, I feel as a writer, also the most important audience is, the writer, him or
That's
herself.
right.
Like you're writing for yourself to work something out for your own soul, to
Yeah.
answer some question, or to work, to kind of process something.
Yeah.
And even if it never, there's a lot of stuff I've written too, and I'm sure you as well, that just stays on my computer now or stays in my journal, and no one ever sees it. And so, but it's an important, therapeutic, offering, and people
Yeah.
should do it more.
I agree. I mean, I first of all, Hemingway says that 10% of what he wrote, we know about. 90% we don't even know about, right?
Mm-hmm.
But just when you bring up like the soul and this sort of existential, like for me, writing is that space I can go to for spirituality, for healing. Exactly what you're saying. It's like, I mean, I encourage everyone to do it. And I'm teaching a class right now on creative nonfiction. I said, I don't care if you don't even share it with me. Just write it for yourself.
Right.
Write it for the cathartic experience that it could be. So yeah, I fully support that.
Yeah, and I think it really does work through. So does it have a publisher yet?
No, I'm sort of in the process. I've given it to a few writers to give me feedback. I'm revising it, And then that's the next step, is try to get an agent. I think I could do academic stuff, but non-academic stuff, I think I have to get an agent. So that's, I think, the challenging part, find an agent,
Right.
and then they try to shop it around.
So the other published works are through educational publishing houses. So you need a different
Academic,
kind
yeah.
of, you need a different hat almost, and a different publisher. Okay,
Exactly.
I understand.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what was the reaction to the family? We kind of skipped over that.
My mom won't read it, if I'm honest.
Oh.
She won't. She gave it to her therapist to read, and then in fact, and this is a true story, she gave it to her therapist to read so he could talk to her about it. And then I go back to Long Island to visit her, and she goes, "Come on, we're going somewhere." And I'm like, "Where are we going?" She goes, "We're going to my therapist to talk about that book you wrote." And so I'm in her therapist I was talking about. And so what I did is I actually wrote about that and start the whole book off with that experience. Yeah, my brother Michael loved it. He wrote to me and said, I love the book. I don't remember everything the way you do."
That's by the way, makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So people have different perspectives and different, they lived it differently almost because it's through their own eyes.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. And what happened was, as a result of giving it to them, we started having conversations about the things that had happened between us, and in the family.
And did that offer some healing for everyone?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's beautiful. It was a really beautiful experience, actually, and it's ongoing. Wonderful. It's ongoing. Yeah. So
yeah, I'm happy for you, because I think that's the most important result of that book.
That's right. It doesn't even matter at this point. I have it printed out. It's fine. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's worked it's worked its magic in
exactly.
a sense.
Yeah, you get it.
The most important readers have used it.
Yeah. I'll just share this. My sister Veronica read it, and at that point I was using pseudonyms, and she texted me. I said, let me know if I can use your name or whatever, She texted me. She read her chapter, because I have a chapter for each person in my family, She read her chapter. She texted me. She goes, "Rob, I laughed, I cried, I cringed. You can keep my name." And that was like really meaningful to me, and it was just, yeah. So I think they love it. It's part of it. It's their story too. So.
Yeah. It's interesting because part of what I'm sure your family reacted to is, it's, how you're perceived by others. You're not always, you think you're projecting, one image. So I think that's something hard to kind of, take in, like, oh, I thought this is how he or she was understanding what I said. And then when they repeated it back to me, I didn't mean that. I didn't, I'm just being very small. I didn't mean to be mean. I was just like saying what I thought. So there's all sorts of things.
And then to see, like, I tried to put myself in a situation, like, what would it be like if someone wrote me into something? And I'm like, wait, like, you're representing me, on the page. It's that, I don't know how I would respond to that,
Yeah, that's great. Look, and I think it's an important lesson that we can offer to people. Just write. Write your thoughts down.
Absolutely.
And just, even if you just, fold it up and put it in your desk drawer and never look at it again. It's important to get it out on paper and to work through things. That I firmly believe that. So, Rob, we have to wrap up.
It's great. Great talking with you, Steve.
It's great catching up with you. And I appreciate all the preparation that you did for this. You took this so seriously. I really appreciate it. Yeah. So I appreciate learning about what you're researching and the offerings that you've given us there. And it's just great learning about your life. And I look forward to seeing you either in Missouri or Long Island when you and Melissa come and visit. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
This is Monday Musings.